Okay, welcome to the book club for actually book club part 2 for Codependency for Dummies by Darlene Lancer. That's the book we'll be discussing tonight. So welcome everybody. Normally we just do book club the last Thursday of every month at 6:30 p.m. But this book was so full of so much information that we decided to do this video in 2 parts. So tonight we're going to be discussing, oh boy, like the inner child part of it all. She's got tons of exercises in there. Even if a person doesn't identify with being codependent, there's still, especially the last half of the book, that's full of exercises, getting to know yourself, about boundaries and intuition and self-discovery and self-awareness. It's just, I really enjoyed it. So that's what we'll be discussing tonight. And let's see if people are hopping on. Tanitria, hello. Adriana, Chanty, Leslie, Cynthia, welcome, welcome. And before I forget, a couple things real quick here. My first book, Start Here, which you can find on Amazon. I'll be putting a link after this video renders, I think is what it's called, on YouTube. So once this video actually goes live and I can post comments, I'll post a link to it. But my first book, Start Here, is the ebook version is free on Amazon today, ending tomorrow night. So if you haven't read it, if you're interested in reading it, if you want to grab a copy for somebody that you think might benefit from it, please be my guest to do that. I would love to give away as many copies as I possibly can of the book. I think we're up to 100 copies given away so far today. So that's super exciting. I'd really like to see if we could give away at least 1,000. So spread the word if that's something that interests you. That book, Start Here, just kind of a real quick rundown. That's full of all of the terms, the most common, I should say, the most common terms, definitions, frequently asked questions. There's tons of examples in there. I mean, it's really like the book, if you're going through this and you're overwhelmed by all the information out there and all the terminology and just everything, this is a really great book to start with. That's why I called it Start Here. It's just kind of an all-in-one resource manual. So I hope that helps. And okay, second, so my book, for those of you hopping on, my book, Start Here, is the ebook version is free on Amazon. You can find it by going to Amazon and you can search my name, Dana Morningstar, and find the book there. So that's that. And let's see, book club for February that we're going to be discussing at the end of February is Who's Pulling Your Strings by Harriet Bracker and Kate Reading. Who's Pulling Your Strings is the book we're going to be reading. I will also be putting a link down below in this video as well for that book if you're interested. And last but not least, if you are an Audible person, you like to listen on your drive to work or what have you, you can go to audibletrial.com/thriveafterabuse and get a free Audible book if you sign up for the subscription. So if that interests you at all, it helps the channel, it helps support what I do, and it's a win-win, and you get a free audiobook. So that's audibletrial.com/thriveafterabuse. And Colleen, thank you so much for letting me know that. She says, I read Start Here the first couple of weeks after the discard, and it helped me so much. Get it if you are new to these ideas. Awesome. Thank you so much. You know, this was my first book that I put out, and I was so, it's really nerve-wracking writing about this topic because there's just so much to cover. And so I'm really glad that it was able to help you. And hopefully kind of at least point you in the direction and give you some clarity and validation of what you were going through. And also, I have a podcast. I just happened to look. So I just wanted to say real quick, thank you guys for everybody that's been leaving reviews on either my books or on the podcasts. I My podcast is also called Thrive After Abuse, and I went on there today just to see, and I have 21 reviews. So that's super exciting. I Last time I checked, I think I had 12. So that's always it helps other people find content whenever you leave, not just for, for me, but like for people in general. If you When people leave reviews on Amazon or on iTunes or anywhere, it helps. So I definitely appreciate that. Let me scroll down here. Um, so Carla asks, when two narcissistic parents are dismissive, the adult children to the adult, wait, when two narcissistic parents are dismissive, the adult children does one adult become always sick and the other child adult become okay, and does the other child become a narcissist too, like parents? So I think kind of the prevailing theory is that whenever you have a narcissistic parent, and especially if you have two, then odds are the children are going to be starved out emotionally and they're going to have issues because of that. And so children can kind of tend to go really one of two ways. Either they become incredibly narcissistic themselves, or they go the opposite way and really become more codependent. And that's has a lot to do with the book that we're going to be discussing tonight. Although I would say if you're new to this whole topic, I would start with the first video on this book, Codependency for Dummies, which we did last week. That'll really kind of get you more up to speed about that. But there's a lot of different theories as far as different types of attachment disorders that occur when a child has a narcissist as a parent, and how they oftentimes, for those of us that tend to go more on like the codependent side of the spectrum, uh, there's it's codependency is a lot of a kind of being out of alignment with yourself. Well, I guess you could say narcissism is too. But with codependency, it's more of that feeling of that we feel the need to develop a lot of like people pleasing behaviors. We put everybody else first. We put ourselves last. We're very in tune with other people, their pain, their emotions, kind of the energy in the room, but we're not in tune with ourselves. And we may not realize it, or we may realize it, but we might feel guilty. I think a lot of codependent people in general tend to have a lot of guilt, guilt and shame. And guilt and shame that's not ours. We tend to carry that guilt and shame for the other people in our lives, and oftentimes spend our childhood and I would say a good chunk of our adulthood too, until we can actually get into alignment, um, feeling guilty, feeling that shame, twisting ourselves into an emotional pretzel, trying to keep everybody else around us happy, feeling like our wants and needs and feelings don't matter. If we have trouble asserting ourselves, having boundaries, all of that. And so when a person is that out of alignment with themselves to where they're not in tune with their emotions, their thoughts, their feelings, their intuition, their wants, their needs, any of that, you can see how this is kind of like the perfect storm for that more codependent type personality to get involved with a narcissist. And I had a realization too at the end of book club last week. This is something that had tripped me up for a long time. Is there's kind of this prevailing thought that codependent people. So the difference between codependency and dependency is, excuse me, hold on a second. I have a tickle in my throat. Sorry. Dependency is more of a person needs somebody else to take care of them. Codependency is that we seek out, it's more like we need to be needed, that we seek out people to go take care of. And I really didn't identify with that for really up until last week. And so the aha moment that I had last week was I never felt like I needed to be needed, but I felt I was very comfortable with being needed. And so in the history of my life, I had started off in a wide variety of caregiving fields. I was a teacher, I was a nurse, I have was a domestic violence advocate. I took care of my grandmother who had dementia and then Alzheimer's when I was younger with my mother. And so this had been my life. And so I was very comfortable and very in tune with in different types of caregiving situations. And the people that I befriended, the men that I dated were no different. I had a pattern of kind of quote unquote projects in my life. And, but it was weird because that was an aha moment for me. Like I didn't feel like I needed to be needed, but I was definitely comfortable being needed. Like, okay, I can dive in and I can jump in and help. That was the thing that had been driving me for a very long time. And I had thought I'd gotten to the place in my life where I didn't feel that compulsive need to try to fix other people, or I really wasn't attracted to that kind of baby bird with a broken wing, which had been my pattern, especially with dating and in many ways with friends. So, um, but so I don't know. So that was a big aha. Just Yeah, James says, "Oh my God, that makes so much sense. I always want to fix people and help them instead of being with somebody that's independent." Mind blown. Yeah, it's a big man. I tell you, there's just a few of these aha moments that when you hear them, and that's to me, that's a big benefit of the different support groups out there and the YouTube videos in general from a wide variety of YouTube speakers. It's just that one thing that you hear and you're like, boom, done. That's it. Like that's been a big piece to the puzzle for me. And really kind of making that shift instead of being like, okay, this person needs me, and taking action from that obligation or that guilt, feeling the need to stay around, to help them get sober, to help them get therapy, to help them change, to help them stop being abusive or stop cheating, stop what have you, and be like, okay, I'm done. I don't, you know, I can't fix anybody. They can only fix themselves. And I don't want a project, I want a partner. And so that's, yeah, big, big shift there. Okay, great question, Mia. Mia says, is a covert or vulnerable narcissist kind of similar to codependent with their behavior sometimes on the outside, obviously, since some people describe them as very needy and aggressively demanding and needy. So vulnerable narcissists, they kind of go back and forth, and there's a couple differences here. So what I have experienced, and I think a lot of people have experienced, is more on like the malignant end of that, like the psychopathic end of that kind of behavior, is they will oftentimes play the part of the baby bird with the broken wing. Like, I need you, I'm damaged. I had a excuse me. Mm, like, oh, I had an abuse. Oh, gosh, hold on. Sorry, this is the room where the cats are in all the time, and I think there's just a bunch of cat hair floating around in here. mm. Am I good? I think I'm good. Uh, where they will pretend to be like the baby bird with a broken wing and say, oh, I was abused as a child, and I just have trouble with trusting, and they come across we take pity on them, and oftentimes we can relate. We're like, oh, okay, this person really gets me, I really get them, and they'll start talking about how wounded they are and how hurt they are, and honestly, their story may or may not even be true. And so then what happens is all of a sudden we're really relating to them. We're building up their self-esteem. They might just be saying, "Oh, you know what? You're too good for me. Um, you're so amazing." And then we're finding ourselves, "No, you're great too, and there's so much good about you." And we're really building them up. And then things slowly start to turn, and then kind of the abuse, the devalue starts up, in a wide variety of ways. It might be kind of subtle put downs, just subtle devaluing behaviors, but then that tends to escalate over time. So there's that part of it. And then with the vulnerable narcissists, it's more of that can come across in several different ways, but sometimes they might come across as very confident, very self assured, but they have like a paper thin ego. And so, if anything, they can go from being an absolute jerk to just crumpling in front of you, where you can almost see like this wounded child that they just don't handle criticism well, like at all. It's very, very bizarre to actually see something like that. So, there's that part of it. The neediness, is in the aggressive, demanding stuff. That's not so much codependent behavior. That's, to me, that's controlling behavior. And at first it can come across as we might even be flattered by that. Like, oh, they want to spend all their time with me. They just want to be with me they want to be with me all the time. They need me. They might even say things like, if we have an issue with something, that they'd be willing to work on it, that they'll do anything, that kind of stuff. They're wanting to talk and text for hours upon hours every day. And then that's, but then there starts to be consequences if things aren't done their way. There's silent treatment, there's pouting, there's, put downs, name calling, all kinds of stuff. So to me, it's very different. One of the concerns I had with this book, and kind of with a lot of the topic of codependency in general, is that there is oftentimes in this discussion very much a blurring between narcissism and codependency. And to me, they are very different things. You've got two very different types of people, both of which are trying to get needs met. We all have needs. People try to get their needs met, but the way they go about it are two very, very different. They go about it in two very different ways. Codependent people tend to have this mindset of you complete me, and oftentimes they don't like being alone. They are, kind of compulsively seeking out relationships. They are very quick to twist themselves into an emotional pretzel to keep other people happy around them. Whereas narcissists are the exact opposite. So codependent people are comfortable being needed, whereas narcissists are comfortable taking and getting. So it's like very different. Codependent people give. We give of ourselves. We'll give and give and give and give and give until there's nothing left to give. Narcissists will take and take and take and take and take until they completely drain that person dry, and then they just kind of crumple them up, and then they're on to the next one. So, and interestingly enough, I think there's a lot of narcissists out there that, because they have such a twisted way of viewing the world and themselves and their place in the world, that they will often claim to be codependent. They're like, oh man, I just give, and the world's always done them wrong. But the more you kind of find out about the reality, like they have a very edited reality where, um, they always feel jilted or slighted. But they're like, oh, I give and I give and I give, but I can't see my kids now, and I can't, you know, um, what have you. But the reality is, like, well, they can't see their kids because they've been incredibly abusive, or because of like legitimate reasons that they just gloss over. So, okay. So kitties are cute. You bring up a great point. Um, and it says, I have in the past thought someone was a victim and they are in an abusive relationship, but it turns out the victim is just as bad and narcissistic as their toxic partner. Sometimes. And oftentimes when it does get to that degree, what's actually going on is it's a term called reactive abuse. And so with people that are codependent, people that are codependent, um, oftentimes have like a high investment in relationships. It's that idea of a commitment is forever, and they will hang in there until they can no longer hang in there anymore. And so, um, because it's not an option for them to leave in their mind, they have nothing. It's like their skill set for how they're going to handle things becomes very limited. So if you've got this other person, this other partner in the relation, like partner in quotes, in relationship, who's lying and cheating and manipulating and stealing and abusing and using and doing all these things, well, this codependent person's being dragged through hell because in their mind, commitments forever. I need this other person, or they need me. They need me to help them, to fix them, to help get them sober, to stop the abuse, to help repair their bad childhood, what have you. So they're getting dragged through hell, and because it's not an option for them to leave, then what they do is they try to make staying tolerable. And that's when then oftentimes they will start becoming abusive back. So instead of a more, a healthier option, which would be to leave if somebody's, using, abusing, dragging us through hell for any reason, or insisting like you need to go to rehab or I'm done, really having consequences for how they're being treated. If they're going to continue to stay, because that narcissistic behavior is so crazy, making that stonewalling, the gaslighting, the minimizing, the blaming, all of it, it's infuriating. And so then that codependent person will oftentimes lash out and become violent, or become really verbally aggressive, because it, they call narcissists and sociopaths crazy makers for a reason. And it literally is, it's absolutely enraging to try to deal with a child in an adult body, and who just who can't handle the truth. A narcissist is continually rewriting reality on the fly, and it's exhausting and it's infuriating. So yes, oftentimes at the tail end of those relationships, it's very hard to tell like what's going on here, who is the abuser, who is the target of abuse. um, you know Things can get really, really heated really fast. The gal, what was her name? I want to say her name was Elaine Pizzi. they she was one of the first people to start up a domestic violence shelter, and that was one of the things she noticed. Is she's like, man, a lot of these women that are coming in here are also incredibly abusive, and what's going on? But I think the piece that she was missing was, because to an outsider, if they're like, oh, these poor women, they're just battered and they just need a safe refuge and everything will be fine. But that's not how abuse works, and that's not how trauma works. And so when a person has been pushed so far, they're oftentimes they get to that place where they do snap and they just become absolutely enraged and they do go on the attack. So, and Free Spirit says, my ex was misdiagnosed with bipolar and I felt bad leaving a sick person. And, here's the thing. I think I see a lot of people struggle with this, where and I struggled with it to some degree as well too, where it's like, okay, well, but what if they're not a narcissist? What if they are bipolar? What if they borderline personality disorder? What if they just have like, a bad childhood? I mean, based, and then the question, really, the underlying question there is, can they be fixed? You know? And I always encourage people to think about it in terms of like, what is acceptable behavior for you, and what time period would you need to see, what kind of changes would you need to see, and in what time period? Because really at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if they have a mental illness or a personality disorder, or if it's alcohol or drugs or what have you. If abusive behavior is abusive behavior. And yes, there is oftentimes a lot of guilt walking away, because you're like, man, this person, um, sometimes too, I think with the vulnerable narcissists, where you're like, I get why they are the way they are. Like they had this awful childhood and they just can't, they can't function as a healthy, integrated adult, but it doesn't make their treatment or mistreatment of other people okay. Like it's okay to have standards and boundaries and to walk away from people that are hurting you. But yeah, I get it. Mia asks, yes, but are we also very needy in the needing them to need us way? Hold on, I got to wrap my mind around that. Yes, but aren't we also very needy in the needing them to need us? Yes. Okay, I get it. Yes. So codependent people do tend to be more kind of clingy and there's degrees of this, okay? But clingy and needy and more of that kind of anxious attachment type bonding to other people. It's that fear of I think it's oftentimes it's that fear of being left. And I think oftentimes the reason that it's that fear of being left is because we've been left so many other times before. So one of the things that they found when they first began researching the concept of codependency, all of this started back with alcoholics. And you had the alcoholic and they began looking at alcoholics as a whole. And they're like, man, there's a lot of behaviors here that really repeat. And then they realized, hey, there's a lot of behaviors here that repeat within the spouses of alcoholics. And hey, there's a lot of behaviors here that repeat within the dynamics between the alcoholic and the spouse. And one of the things that they found was so at first, the spouse of an alcoholic, they used to call them co alcoholics. And then they switched that term to codependent. So they found that, okay, so while the alcoholic needed the alcohol, the codependent needed the alcoholic to need them. And what oftentimes would happen is after the alcoholic got sober, that oftentimes the codependent person would sabotage a lot of the attempts for the alcoholic to get sober, whether that was intentional or unintentional. But they were like, man, it's really difficult to get this codependent spouse on board with helping this addict get sober. Like they need to have boundaries, they need to have, and of course too, like there's a heavy degree of manipulation when you're living with an alcoholic or an addict, right? So I think that was a big part of it, but it was also they also found that the divorce rate after the alcoholic spouse would get sober would go up. And I think there's a wide variety of reasons for that, but I think in part when a codependent person is used to having this role of being a caretaker and then all of a sudden they're not in that role, it's kind of you don't know what you're supposed to do anymore. Like this is what I do. Like I take care of you, I- you know, and then if that person doesn't need to be taken care of anymore, then that codependent person is just kind of, floating around and like doesn't really know what their role is in that relationship anymore. So, yes, I agree. Colleen says, I think both codependents and narcissists were wounded as children, but cope in very different ways. I agree completely. Absolutely. Either way, it's not healthy. It's not healthy for other people and it's definitely not healthy for us. And the I think the scariest part about codependency is it's such an erosion of a person's self. And that erosion probably started fairly early on in childhood. And as that person continues to get into like toxic relationship after toxic relationship, they lose just more and more and more of themselves. And the more these relationships end, the more they're kind of in this scramble to find another relationship and to get that love. Because oftentimes it's very much that feeling of, I need somebody to complete me. I need to feel loved. I need to feel validated instead of learning how to give that to ourselves. We're looking towards other people. And so when we're doing that, there tends to just be, this never ending cycle of relationships because we're not bonding to people in a healthy way to begin with. And and two, of course, like addicts, alcoholics, and abusers, these are not emotionally available people. And I'm not saying that to knock on anybody that's ever struggled with alcoholism or addiction, but when you're in a relationship with somebody who is an addict or an alcoholic, there's three of you in that relationship. There's you, there's them, and then there's the addiction. And it's just it just drags everybody down in that dynamic. So it's really, and untreated codependency, if we don't find that alignment, if we don't start making ourselves a priority, if we don't develop healthy boundaries and standards and get in tune with our intuition and really get to the bottom of this kind of stuff, it can lead to addiction within us. It can lead to all kinds of unhealthy coping mechanisms. It can lead to severe depression, anxiety, uh, and then possibly even suicide, or really putting us in very dangerous situations with very dangerous people because we're continuing to put them first. Like, oh well, they need me, this person's threatening suicide, or they want to see me again, and it's like this person has this history of domestic violence and they're a very dangerous person. When we're continuing to put another person's needs ahead of our own, or if we're continuing to be like, I need this person, I feel addicted to them, I feel like they complete me, I can't live without them, we're being so driven by our vulnerabilities and our unmet needs that can lead to really dangerous situations. That's how a lot of these like murder suicides happen in really extreme situations. So it's really important for us to do an honest inventory about our life, and what has been the pattern of our relationships, and um, kind of what does need to get more in balance there. So okay, so with that said, let's hop into the book. So she talks about recovery and with from codependency, and says many people begin recovery out of pain to help someone else or to save a relationship. This is very common for Al-Anon. One of the most common things for Al-Anon is they'll recommend that the spouse or children of an alcoholic get into Al-Anon, and they'll oftentimes recommend it as, if you really want to help them get sober, go to Al-Anon. And it's almost like this backdoor way of getting people in there, because codependent people oftentimes will not seek out therapy for themselves. They're like, no, 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 I'm fine. I'm just in a relationship with an alcoholic or an abusive person, but I'm fine. But then they start getting into these Al Anon meetings, and then that's when they start learning about boundaries and kind of healthy boundaries and what we can control, which is ourselves and ourselves only, and what we can't control, which is other people, and learning kind of a healthier way of being. So a lot of people come into recovery in order to try to help other people, but then they start realizing that there's stuff within themselves that needs to get more into alignment. In order for help for any type of treatment to actually work, therapy, Al-Anon, what have you, it has to be for us. And coach, she says, codependency robs us of our vibrancy, contentment, health, and the ability to live an authentic life. These are the things that will make you happy in the long run. Putting yourself is difficult and uncomfortable when you've been making other people a priority. To develop any new skill or build an emotional muscle, you have to exercise it regularly, not just when you feel like it. Recovery is not a straight path, rather, it is cyclical. It can often be two steps forward and one step back. You may experience confusion, stagnation, frustration, and slips backward, but most of the time you'll move into recovery. And as far as telling other people about your recovery, I thought this was a very valid point. Recovery is for you, and you don't need to tell other people what you are doing. Oftentimes, they will be intentionally They will intentionally or unintentionally try to talk you out of changing. They might be afraid that you will leave. They'll be afraid that you'll get stronger and challenge them. They want to continue their addiction. They're ashamed and afraid you'll make them look bad or talk bad about them. And be especially aware of quote unquote friends who gossip, have strong biases, abuse drugs or alcohol, envy or compete with you, don't empathize, and tell you to get over your problems. And that is very, very true. Change of any kind oftentimes creates tension among other people, because it's kind of that unspoken feeling of, well, then now things are going to be different, but then how are they going to be different? And especially within a dynamic where if you are with a person, if you've got friends or a significant other who is abusive or an addict or an alcoholic, where they're like, no, 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 everything is fine just the way that it is. You don't need to be doing that. You don't need to be going to therapy. You don't need to be talking to other people, like running your mouth about our business. What stays in the house, what happens in the house stays in the house. That's the very common kind of understood truth with when you're living with an addict, an alcoholic, or an abuser. They don't want anybody else to know what's going on. It's all about secrets and minimization. So let me scroll down here. I still need to go through my notes, and I have 40 pages of notes from this book. I still need to go through them and condense them and get them on my website. So I am still planning on doing that. It's just taken me longer than I thought. Okay, so back to living an authentic life and how that is kind of the root of happiness for each of us. And our inner child is our authentic self. Like, there is no living an authentic life if we're not in tune with our authentic self. And our inner child is needy, who requires, I should say needy, requires love, attention, affection. They're playful, they're creative, they're spontaneous. They can be vulnerable, they're authentic, they're innocent, they're enthusiastic and energetic, they're loving and lovable. And they feel like they matter. They matter. Like their wants, their needs, their feelings matter. It's just like a little kid. Like, a little kid will oftentimes, they are who they are, and they don't have those feelings of shame yet, unless they've been abused. But kind of healthy, well-adjusted children tend to be fairly confident in who they are, and because they haven't been exposed to the world yet, and the world tends to hammer all that stuff out of people. But when you're a child, you still are like, yeah, this is who I am and this is what I like. And so really reconnecting that part of yourself. Our inner child, as we become an adult, will oftentimes let us know through emotions that our needs are being neglected. If we're finding ourselves going through depression, addiction, illness, or pain, oftentimes this is a sign that our needs are being neglected. So learning to befriend our child self. Now, this is a concept that can sound really kind of just woo-woo to like a lot of people. And they might think, well, what is the inner child? Does that mean I need to go, color or play on a swing or, put my hair in pigtails? Like what exactly does that mean? But it really means getting in tune with that inner self and what that like I was saying, what your wants, your feelings, your needs, all of that kind of stuff. What's going on with you? Learning to nurture yourself, learning to just be open and honest with yourself. She gives an exercise here, and she says, okay, sit or lie down and relax. Imagine going to the home where you grew up. Notice how you feel outside of the home and then upon entering. Pay attention to the smells, sounds, voices, footsteps, decor, and what you feel in your body. Do this slowly in every room until you find your child. Look into their face and discover what they are feeling. Speak to them gently with kindness and compassion, and learn what the child part of you felt in the past and wants and needs now. Reassure your child that you're interested and listening and that you'll do all you can to fulfill their needs and desires. On paper, paint or draw your inner child with your non dominant hand. So if you're normally right handed, use your left hand. Tell your perfectionist critic to leave you alone. Whatever you draw is exactly right. Now interview the child you've created. Ask them questions and answer with your non dominant hand. Find out what your child is feeling, what matters most, and what your child needs and wants you to know. Your child speaks to you through your body movement. Allow your body to move however you want, play music however you want. How do you feel? Move in a way that expresses or emphasizes that feeling. You may want to curl into a ball, climb the walls, or pound the floor. See if sounds or words want expression. Allow them, howl them, sing them, and write them. Make it a habit of dialoguing with your inner child on a daily basis to discover your wants, feelings, and needs. Ask your child's opinions about plans, decisions, which friends feel safe and which don't. Ask your child about its early favorites, favorite playmate, discovery, food place, pastime, teacher, TV show, book, fairy tale, song, and so on. You may not actively remember much about your childhood, but after you start writing, more will come to you. Write a dialogue with your child to find out feelings about the events, trips, discoveries, memories, and people. A good parent respects, listens to, empathizes, comforts, encourages, and guides a child as well as sets limits. Nurturing begins with acceptance, understanding, and giving love. Begin building bridges of trust by nurturing, listening, and talking to your child in these ways. Listening. Take time to create quiet. Be alone with your inner child and allow yourself to hear what's on your child's mind. Mirroring. You can repeat back what your child says to you and name the feelings, such as, I hear you are sad. Understanding. Acknowledge and validate your feelings that are coming up. Yes, it was unfair that you were treated that way, and that must have hurt a lot. Acceptance. It's okay. You're not bad for feeling angry, hopeless, or confused. All feelings are okay. I think this is a big thing for a lot of people, regardless of how abusive of a home they grew up in, is many people, myself included, feel like they're betraying their family or that they're somehow whining or complaining or that they should just be grateful for what was given to them as a child. And so there can be a lot of these feelings of guilt or selfishness or um, just kind of general discomfort with acknowledging, yeah, this happened, and you know what, that really hurt, and that was okay. I think oftentimes too, children are told, well, you know what, you had it a lot better than me, or that's not that bad. You know, there's children starving in Africa, or well, you know, and parents will try to. I think sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's more unintentional. They just try to kind of minimize the hurt that the child experienced. And so it's a big part in healing to just to sit there and realize, you know, you're not betraying your family. You're just being honest with yourself about certain events or situations that did hurt you, and to just be real about that, you know? Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you had a parent that was mentally ill or that had Alzheimer's or that was severely depressed or that was working 3 jobs. You know, if you were feeling neglected or um, really lonely or sad or whatever, that like that's how you felt. And so we don't need to necessarily make our parents, you know, bad for what happened. Although some parents were, you know, really bad. But if you're struggling with seeing your parent or your childhood in very black and white terms, like either they were good parents or they were bad parents, just realizing these certain events caused me pain. It's okay for me to acknowledge that and then work towards just kind of moving forward from there. Okay, this is a good exercise. Ask your inner child how it feels about how you parent it. That's kind of an interesting take, isn't it? So oftentimes And that's a big part of this, is understanding that we all have this inner child inside of ourselves. It's our authentic self. And once we become an adult, then we start parenting that child. We oftentimes become the critical parent, where we're telling the child, well, you just got to suck it up, or you just got to do this anyhow, or we're minimizing their pain, we're silencing their wants and needs, and we're not validating them, we're not listening to them. So I think that's a big thing, is asking your child, how does it feel about how I'm parenting you? Ask it to be specific about ways that you've disappointed them. Details to these questions provide valuable information about your child's needs. Discover how your child wants to be loved. Start by apologizing and then prove yourself trustworthy through your actions. Keep your commitments and promises, or your child will go back into hiding. Another exercise she offers up is write your child an appreciation letter. Be specific about what you love, then read it out loud to yourself in the mirror. There's so many great exercises in this book. And that is such a big one, is, with turning inward and asking ourselves, what do you need? Like, what can I give to you in this moment? How can I be the most compassionate to myself? And being honest, it's difficult. Like, for example, in my life, I've been doing these live streams for about 2.5 years now. And the first, I would say maybe year and a half, well, I still have an incredible amount of anxiety for like hours ahead of time before I go live. And I continue to do these live streams because I'm fine like 5 minutes in to when they actually start, but it's everything leading up to them is just awful. And I'm always happy that I've done them afterwards, but it's a very difficult thing for me. And uh, when I'm done doing live streams, it emotionally just kind of um, it just takes a lot out of me. And I think it's not even the live streams. I think it's all of the anxiety that's built up to this. But I used to really fight that. And I would get so angry with myself. And I'm like, man, Dana, what's wrong with you? Like, you just need to keep going full steam ahead. And, back when I started all this, I was working full time, and I was working a very emotionally intense job as a psychiatric nurse. And it was too much. And I wasn't allowing myself, I wasn't acknowledging that it was too much. And I didn't understand. I'm like, what is wrong with me? Why I would do the live stream on a Wednesday night. I'd get done at midnight. I'd be up again at 6, for work. And I'd get home that night and I'd be in bed by like 7. And I couldn't figure out, I thought I was lazy. I just didn't know what was going on with me. And now I've realized, you know what? I love doing these live streams. I have a lot of anxiety ahead of time, and it kind of takes a lot out of me. So I need to really plan for like kind of a down day the day after. And that might be the day that I do laundry, or uh, go do something that is really recharging, go spend some time with a friend, go just read a fiction book, something that's just totally different. Allow myself to just go veg and watch a movie. And so asking myself, okay, what do you need? Like, how can I take care of you during this? It's just been such a game changer. But it might, I tell you, it can be very difficult to kind of quiet down that critical parent voice of all of those shoulds, how we should feel, how we should act, and all of that judgment that we put in ourselves. Colleen says, Dana, you come across as calm and relatable. Well, that's good. I'm glad I don't come across as super anxious. But yeah, I it's tough. It's tough being. I was talking to Travis the other day, and I was telling him, because he knows how anxious I get. And he's like, well, yeah, I can totally see why you would feel that way. He's like, it's basically like you're getting up and doing improv every single week for 3 hours. I was like, you know what? You're right. I think that is why I feel that way. Because you just never know what's going to happen in the chat, or what kind of questions you're going to get asked. And anyways, I had just really didn't realize how I think it's because I was also comparing myself to other people that I had seen do live streams. And I'm like, man, they just are so good at that and they make it seem so effortless. And I didn't feel that way. And so then I just thought, well, what's so wrong? What's wrong with me? Like, I just need to get over it. I need to be more like that. I just need to do it. And um glad I'm glad I'm out of that. So, oh, that is a great thing, Elizabeth. Elizabeth says, I heard an analogy that I find useful. My relationship with my mother is like a soup in which she only put in, oh, that's gonna make me cry. It's like a soup in which she only put in two or three ingredients. So it's very poor. I wish she would have made a richer soup. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I remember one of the realizations that I had growing up was, the kind of that concept of different emotional buckets and realizing that I think kind of really kind of both my parents, but my father especially, I was like, like his 100% is like my 10%. His bucket's just not very deep. And that was and that's how I used to describe it to other people. I was like, I really think he's doing all he can do. It's just his 100% is like my 10%. And there's like this huge disconnect there. But it's the same thing. Like I needed so much more than what he was able to give. I love the soup analogy. Yeah, like you just needed a lot more ingredients. Yes, and Tammy, okay, I'm glad you mentioned this because I wish I was thinking, I'm like, I really should have circled back to that. Tammy was saying, I actually love coloring. It's very meditative. My ex made fun of it though. I haven't colored for some time. Yes, absolutely. Uh, Coloring, there's so many fantastic adult coloring books out there with mandalas, with animals, with all kinds of things. And it really is, you're absolutely right. It's very meditative. It allows our brain just to relax, and it helps with anxiety. It helps with depression. It helps to be in the moment. Um, People, when the whole concept of adult coloring came out, I think a lot of people were like, oh, what is that? Come on now. But then it really began catching on, and people were like, wow, this is actually really fantastic. This is very calming, very soothing. It's kind of this zen kind of thing because you just zone out and you're just in the moment. So yeah, rediscovering, what did you like? And sometimes I think it can be helpful to examine, like, what did you like as a child? Maybe that can be a good starting place. So maybe if you were, really into gymnastics as a kid, that you might really be into gymnastics now, or maybe yoga now, or um, or martial arts of some sort, or if you really liked singing or drawing, to go take some classes as an adult and explore that and see, is this still what interests me in this chapter of my life? And then to start asking, like, what really juices you? And we've talked about this before, but that whole concept of that emotional scale of really learning to examine how do I feel about certain things? 10 being, man, this really juices me, 5 being lukewarm, 0 being ice cold. And learning to tune in to things. I remember once I was with a friend. It's kind of along the same lines, but I just, it was again, like one of those kind of like game changer things that a person just says. And it was just such a casual thing, but I'm like, wait, what? Like, what? We were in a store and she had made a comment. We were looking at clothes and she's like, oh no, I don't like this material. She's like, I'm really weird about material. I have to really like how it feels on my skin. And I realized, I'm like, oh my God, I've never once paid attention to that. But I think that's a big thing for me too. And I went home that night and I had never allowed, I had been, oh man, like so used my whole life settling for crumbs that it really was, I was so out of tune with my thoughts and feelings across the board on every single level, relationships, friends, with food, with clothes, with where I lived, like all of it. And that was kind of one of those moments where I began going through my closet. I'm like, man, why do I have button down tops in here? I don't like button down tops. I don't like things with collars. It just like it freaks me out. I like kind of comfortable tops. I like things that are soft. I don't like things that are scratchy. And once I was aware that I wasn't in tune with that, it's amazing how quickly you can become in tune with it once it's brought to your attention. And so to start kind of asking yourself, like, what does make you feel calm? And what does make you feel angry? What are you passionate about? What are you, what do you like? What kind of foods do you like? Where do you like to travel? Like, if what do you like better, oceans or mountains? Kind of all of these questions are such a great way to start getting to know yourself. And then she says too, getting in the practice of asking yourself how you feel, what you want, and what you need in the moment. And that's so true. And then realizing that it's amazing how if we might not even think that we have time to do certain things, or that we're living this whole life based on shoulds, and realizing just how much power you do have in your own life and how much you actually can change, and carving out 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there can really add up no matter how busy you are. And to be like, hey, what do I need? And maybe that's giving yourself some time in the morning to, instead of listening to the news, if you're like, you know what, every morning I feel really anxious, and then you realize, you know what, it's because I listened to the news all morning long, to switch to maybe listening to a podcast, that may be a totally different podcast, like a comedy podcast, or listening to something that's really inspirational in the morning, something that nourishes your spirit in the morning, and something that nourishes your spirit in the evening. Or maybe you decide, you know what, I used to just go and go and go and go and go, and then until I collapsed in the evening. And so now maybe you're like, you know what, I think I'd like to do is to take the last 20 minutes of the evening and read, turn my phone off, turn the TV off, and just get lost in a good book. So, and whatever answer you come up with, that's okay. Like it's all about you finding you. That's the whole purpose of all of this. Uh let's see here. And she says, shame is a big part of codependency, and as is healing shame. Shame comes and goes like any other emotion, but codependents have a lot of internalized shame. They think that they are bad, unlovable, guilty, selfish, weak, or responsible for abuse. Children are innocent, and so were you, no matter what you were told. Even if you weren't accused or blamed, you probably blame yourself. When children are powerless to set boundaries or leave their parents, they idealize them and attribute positive traits in order to survive and create a feeling of safety. It's more comforting to believe, if I'm good, mom or dad will love me, than it is to think mom and dad are self centered, don't care about me, or are unreliable. That truth would be frightening and would lead to despair. Some children withdraw, some try to become powerful. The problem is these coping mechanisms continue unconsciously when they're no longer helpful and restrict our feelings, choices, and actions. So, like we were talking about before, if a person is feeling powerless in a situation where they can't set boundaries and they feel like they can't leave, this starts in childhood, that mindset continues on, oftentimes on into adulthood, where this person's like, no, 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 commitment is forever. I have to stay with this person. And they might also be comparing their current relationship to what they experienced as a child. Well, like, well, yeah, maybe they yell at me, they call me names, they steal money, they do all these things, but at least they don't hit me. My mom or dad used to hit me. And so they're thinking, well, it's not that bad because I've experienced worse, which that's a terrible measurement as to how healthy a current situation is. And so this is kind of the beginning of this whole kind of really like Stockholm syndrome. And so if a child is like, well, I'm powerless to leave, I can't set boundaries, I can't complain, all I can do is try to be responsible for this situation as much as possible and think that if I can just basically somehow ingratiate myself enough, people please, walk on eggshells, become compliant, if I can just stay out of the way enough and be good enough and help out enough, that I'll somehow earn their love. And if you've been in the support groups, or you might even experience this in your own life, where a lot of codependent people feel so angry after these relationships end. And they're like, you know what? Nobody would have ever put up with as much as I put up with. And and it's kind of this mindset of I earned it. I earned their love by being dragged through hell, and now they left me for somebody else. And that is a big problem. Like that's a very big red flag as far as like a codependent mindset of thinking that we have to somehow earn somebody's love or loyalty or faithfulness or honesty or what have you, and then feeling jilted after putting up with all of their crap for so long and thinking to ourselves, well, we earned it. They owe us, you know, big red flag. Clarice says, hi, Dana. Your videos helped me so much in my recovery from narcissistic abuse. You are an angel. Hugs from Brazil. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad. So glad that my videos have helped so much. And yes, for those people that are just hopping on, my very first book, Start Here, is free on Amazon for today and tomorrow. So go pick up a copy. The ebook copy is the one that's free. Again, you can find it. You can just search for my name, Dana Morningstar, over on Amazon. And it's that book, Start Here. So please go grab a copy if you are interested in one. Okay, gosh, there's seriously so much in this book. Another exercise she gives here is writing a letter to your parents stating what was done to you, how you felt then, how you feel now, how it has affected you, and then imagine your parent in the chair and read the letter aloud. I think that's really powerful. And she talks about there's different types of trauma that a person can go through. There's the trauma of betrayal, of abuse, which includes constant criticism, addiction or living with an addict or alcoholic, death or abandonment by a loved one. I think that is one that I think often really flies under the radar, where if a child is young and let's say their parent dies for some reason, they they went through a trauma, and that's a lot of grief and anger and all kinds of emotions that they're going to have to really work through. So I think that's something that tends to be very um, kind of glossed over or misunderstood. Kinds of trauma: pain of any kind, peer or sibling teasing, neglect, threat of physical pain, harm, or abandonment, helplessness, poverty, real or threatened loss of anything of value, emotional abandonment, witnessing a trauma to somebody else. And so the reason these are all incredibly traumatic, and the reason like why poverty is can be traumatic, is children, people in general, but especially children, need that sense of security in their life. Like those are the main main buckets we all need to have filled. We have our physical needs, our emotional needs, and then the need is stability in our life, like safety and stability. And so if any of those buckets are kind of low, that's when people start getting in a scramble. They start becoming very like irrational. They just have all kinds of issues start kicking up with that. So uh, it's interesting. So if you kind of look back on your childhood, where like, well, we didn't have certain things, but we had it better than my mom had it. And so like, why do I think a lot of people feel kind of like they feel bad for how they perceive their childhood. And especially if they didn't go through severe abuse of any kind. And then they might be even be confused as to like, well, why do I feel so like I have all this stuff to kind of work through? I don't know. It's just interesting how everybody kind of perceives trauma stuff differently. Um, okay, so some examples of unresolved trauma can be overreacting to triggers, avoiding thinking, experiencing, or talking about triggers for the trauma, avoiding activities that you once enjoyed, feeling hopeless about the future, difficulty concentrating, being excessively fearful, being irritable or angry, having flashbacks, being easily frightened and startled. And what can be so confusing too is with this complex PTSD, when you've got emotional trauma, it tends to not be so directly like cause and effect. So for example, with PTSD that tends to come from events, like if a person's at war or they're in a car accident, their triggers might be very specific to war. So for example, if a person went through Vietnam, they some triggers might be the smell of marijuana or the sound of a car, car backfiring, which sounds like a gunshot, or maybe certain songs that were on the radio at the time, or loud noises, or even like Vietnamese people, or even maybe even people that look like people that they were in their platoon with. So those would be some more common triggers that you could see like, yeah, okay, I could see how this would link up, right? With more complex emotional trauma, like a person might go through, let's say they might go through an abusive relationship, but then they find themselves distrusting friends or having a hard time at work or um, experiencing triggers or kind of feeling irrational in ways that are not related to the original trauma. And so then that can be very confusing and crazy making. Like, well, all of a sudden, I was totally fine before, but now I'm like hoarding food, or I am having trouble sleeping at night, or I don't trust friends and family, or it's just weird. So our brain processes trauma very differently. Okay, so building self awareness. Building self awareness. Getting to know someone means learning their tastes, opinions, and feelings about things. Learning about yourself is the same. Try to listen to your thoughts and observe your behavior just as you would someone else. Journal about your thoughts and feelings can help. So try listening to this is another example she gives here. Try listening to yourself while someone else is talking to you. How often do you agree when you don't know or disagree yet go along to be polite? Do you listen when you don't want to? That's a big one. Do you talk to fill in a do you talk to fill in an uncomfortable silence? Do you ask questions instead of volunteering your thoughts and feelings? Do you deflect compliments? Do you apologize often? Do you silently or aloud blame or criticize yourself or others? At the end of the day, write down everything that you recall and think about how you interact with others. This is not to judge yourself, but to be an exercise in self reflection. What can you tell about yourself based on your behavior? And what did you really think or feel in interactions with others? If you don't know, think about it and try to decide. Did you make a conscious decision not to reveal your thoughts, or was it automatic? And okay, then I like this. She gives this example of, she says, okay, to get better acquainted with yourself, interview yourself. Start with simple questions such as, my favorite color is blank. My favorite foods are blank. My favorite movies are blank. My favorite subjects in school were blank. Continue finding out what you like and you dislike as far as music, animals, fabrics, flowers, sports, hobbies, TV shows, books, people, etc. This was another one of those moments where I realized I think something's really kind of off about me where they have all those security questions like, who was your childhood best friend? What was your favorite color? What is your favorite food? And I was like, oh my God, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And I was having this complete like existential crisis, like trying to answer these security questions from my bank. And that was like one of those moments where I'm like, why don't I know this stuff? And then I kind of realized I had been so, I think, just go with the flow for so long that I really didn't have a solid sense of myself. I wasn't allowing myself to have preferences. And another way that surfaced that I realized too was with holidays and birthdays. And I realized I had been for years, if not decades, telling people, "Oh, you know what? I don't want anything. I don't need anything. Oh, just get me a gift card." And I didn't know what I even wanted. And then I realized that holidays and birthdays had always been a very painful time for me. And so it was easier for me to just not get disappointed. Um, with presents from people that I would just try to avoid it and just be like, "Oh, you don't need to get me anything. Just go donate to like an animal shelter or or just a gift card or something like that." And even though I'm totally fine with donating to an animal shelter because I really don't need more stuff, but it was more of the reason that was driving me to do that. It was me trying to just avoid pain. So it's just interesting when you start really thinking like, what are you about? What are your preferences? And um, it's okay. It's okay. And it's healthy to have preferences. Kevin says, I just used to hide my preferences on things. Yes. I think that's a lot of people. They're just trying to avoid pain. And yeah, and okay, so Rick was talking about the trauma part of it, and he says that's one thing I've definitely noticed lately is how easily I get startled now. Yes. That's one thing. I have been that way for a very long time. I'm pretty sure I was that way before my relationships happened. And I think that I had some other stuff happen in childhood, but I think that's why. But I mean, it's I try to just laugh it off now, but it's bad. I mean, when I was married, I used to joke with we both used to joke about it because he's like, "You are so jumpy." And I was like, we need to get you like a cat collar with a little bell on it. So I always know where you are because even if I knew he was in the house, we would turn the corner. Even if I knew he was in the house, I knew he was down a hallway. If I just happened to turn a corner, and even if he was like 3 feet away, if I was startled, I would just jump like 2 feet in the air. And all of my friends, everybody in my life just laughs because they're like, "You were seriously the jumpiest person I've ever met." And I'm that person. I've thrown popcorn and my drink in a movie theater before, just getting startled. And I mean, it's ridiculous. So yeah, I feel yeah. Bright Blue says, "Are codependents more likely to not have a favorite color or food?" I think the point of that is we probably do, but we're so out of tune from having preferences because maybe we've had this very kind of domineering person in our life that it's always been all about them. Like, what do you want to eat? What is your favorite color? And we've just really learned to kind of take the back seat on a lot of things to where, and that stuff is, again, it's such an ongoing slow erosion of ourselves, and our preferences, I think, are one of the first things to go. And so we might not even realize, like, I didn't realize that that was a problem until I really began filling out the security questions. I'm like, why don't I know this about myself? Like other people seem really grounded in who they are, and I don't feel like I like and then I was like, "Well, is this a good thing or a bad thing?" You know, I don't like, am I just like really open, like open-minded about things? And do I just enjoy a lot of things? Like, I don't know. It was a weird mindset to kind of be in for a while. But I think the point of it is to ask yourself, and I think it's okay to have more than one favorite color, and it's okay to have more than one type of food you like, but really realizing like what do you like and what don't you like? You know? Like, for example, like food wise, I really like food that's flavorful. I love Indian food for that reason. I don't care for food that's really mild or bland. I love Mexican food and I love Indian food. And, just like figuring out, okay, well, what, and it's, it's not, it doesn't have to be carved in stone, right? But like kind of figuring out what do you like and what do you not like and why. Um, Trying to think of another weird thing that I realized about myself. When it comes to food, I like different textures in a meal. So I like something that's crunchy and I tend to like something that's like sweet and sour. And I like something that's soft and something that's crunchy. So like, I don't know. Like if I have, a sandwich, I'll have a pickle with it. Like that kind of a thing. Just, I mean, right? Like it's so not even a big deal, but just kind of learning that stuff about yourself. James says, Dana, you would love Cajun food here in Louisiana. Yes, I do love Cajun food. Red beans and rice and hot sauce. Yes, love it. Okay, let me scroll up here. Karen is talking about getting kind of crappy gifts and says, yes, they are often bad gift givers because they don't know you and they don't care either. And it's a punishment to give creepy gifts or none at all. Yep, absolutely. That's definitely what I had experienced and made excuses for it for freaking decades. And, it's just, I don't set myself up for that anymore. So, um, I used to really internalize that and think like, what's so wrong? Like, what's so wrong with me? And now it's sort of like, you know what? That's not me. It's not me. It's them. And making it a point. And that's another thing that I realized is because I had kind of avoided holidays and birthdays and all of that for so long for myself and for other people. And I think because it was just such a source of pain for me for so long that I had become that. I had become a really terrible gift giver. And it wasn't until I had a friend of mine, this was probably 6 or 7 years ago, and she was so fantastic about giving gifts. And I just remember like my mind was blown because she was so thoughtful and if there was a job where she could buy gifts for other people like that, she would do so well at that. I mean, the way she wrapped it, there was so much thought and energy and effort that went into that. And I remember thinking, like, I want to be more like that. Like, I really want to be able to let people around me know that I care. And so that was, it's those little moments that are those aha moments where like, yeah, that's something that I really need to work on. And I hadn't realized I had tuned that part of myself out to such a problematic degree, because I had gotten to the point where I was like, you know what, I don't even want to celebrate Christmas or birthdays. I'll just get people gift cards. I was doing very impersonal gifts. I'm like, man, I have become like what I hated and I don't want to be like that. And so now I need to work on it. But it's weird because I'm 40 and I feel like there's a lot of things that I'm having to learn for like the first time that I just don't ever think were role modeled in a healthy way for me. And so that's been um like I have to tell myself, Dana, okay, if you're going to go Christmas shopping for people, you really need to make sure that like you have all of your gifts bought by like December 1st. And it's like I have to to really plan this stuff out, where I feel like that kind of stuff comes a lot more effortlessly to other people. But in every single, I don't know, it's just a struggle. It's a struggle for me. It's learning something new. Okay. Let me scroll up here. Yep. Bonnie says it's the disease to please. We are so used to accommodating others that we forget we have a right to be treated well too. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Like I would like to get to the place where my time management is such that I can really bake, and I really want to get like immersed into holidays and birthdays and take time to celebrate things. That was another aha moment I had. Was this was probably 10 years ago, where no, it was longer than that. It was probably 15 years ago. And somebody had pointed out to me that they're like, you don't ever celebrate like your wins. You're always just on to the next thing. And I mean, I guess on some level that did register as weird to me, but I justified it. Like, well, I'm a really hard worker and, y- yeah. But it's interesting. So fast forward 15 years, that planted the seed of I really do need to make it more of an, like I'm missing my life. Like I'm not celebrating all of these little victories along the way. Because it's just this feeling of it's not good enough. It's never enough. I should have done this 10 years ago. What's to celebrate? I'll celebrate some point later on down the road. It was kind of my thinking, and subconsciously my thinking. And so now, with the friends I have, just the other day, my friend was like, we really want to, let's all go out for dinner to celebrate that you got your paperback version done for your first book. And so that's been a big, and it's weird because I think part of it too for me is like, oh, don't worry about me, don't bother about me, I'll be fine. Like I just don't want anybody going to any trouble. And so it's been a process for me to be like, you know what? I would love to go out for dinner. Let's go celebrate this, you know? And to actually just assert myself is such, and that seems like that shouldn't be that difficult, but it kind of is. And so the point being is it's so interesting how we have to kind of go back and like learn. We have to like learn so much about interacting with ourselves and with other people. Yep. Karen says, I grew up pretending to be happy and to be satisfied with everything. Yes. Okay. Let's see. Sue says, yes, let's celebrate ourselves. Yep. And Free Spirit says, I always felt like I was selfish to ask for my needs to be met, as it's how I was made to feel or punished for it as a child. Yes. Here's another aha moment that I had. This was years ago. So my parents divorced when I was 13, my brother was 11. And my brother has always been, I would say, more of the golden child, although I don't know if he would agree with that, but he definitely was. um, and so he stayed living with my father. And my father is fairly well off, and my mom wasn't. And so it was very, we didn't, going out to dinner was a treat. It was something that we did very rarely. I feel like I really kind of had, and my own needs, like clothes and stuff like that, where it was things, money was very, very, very tight when I was growing up with my mom. And I remember going going out to eat with my brother. I don't remember how old we were, but I just remember how, when people say they're like, "Oh, well, we'll just order whatever you want." because they're paying. And I would always order uh, like one of the more affordable things on the menu, you know? And he would literally order whatever he wanted. Like had no shame with ordering. And I think a lot of people are like that. They're like, well, if I want a steak or if I want something that's more mid-priced or more expensive or whatever, they will order that. But I was always like, well, I'll just have a garden burger and a water. Like I would always try to keep my meal costs like way down. I wouldn't order alcohol. I wouldn't order dessert. I wouldn't order an appetizer. It was just I didn't want to you know to take too much, I guess is what it was. And that was a real big realization of that's so interesting that my brother is so different from me and has no problem taking people up on it if they say order what you want. And then it was kind of the added realization, I think down the road, like years later, it was the realization of I don't even really know what I want because I was so used to trying to not be difficult or be a bother or and I didn't want to get told no. I didn't want that the feeling of that I was asking for too much. And so I was just so used to my decisions being like what I felt would be more appropriate than what I actually wanted. Okay, let me see here. Good for you. Amethyst says, hi, Dana. Hi, everyone. I am 62 years old. This is the first year of my life that I'm doing anything for me, everything for me. Good for you. Yes, absolutely. And my mom, she's 74 and she, I would say it's like been in the past 5 years. Now my mother grew up in poverty and I mean, it was really bad. Like my grandfather was a narcissist. He was always out womanizing. All of his money went to him. And neighbors were dropping groceries off on their doorstep. It was just a very kind of scary, uncertain way for them to live. And she, it was never, my mom was very fear based, was very fearful about money and never really allowed herself to enjoy anything, to splurge, to even go on vacation. Like we just did not do a whole lot when I was growing up. And uh it's just been in the past few years where she's been going. It's so good to see her do that, like to actually start living and to be like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go on vacation and I'm going to buy a new outfit and I'm going to go um that was another aha moment that I had with like speaking of uh compromising of with food, realizing like I was buying really cheap bread and cheap coffee and I didn't like it. But I felt like it was too much of a splurge to actually it was silly, right? Like to spend the extra dollar on a loaf of bread and get bread that I liked. Things like that. That was a big mindset shift. Was it an aha moment after Jack of like I need to really raise my standards and quit settling for crumbs and quit justifying stuff that's a problem and realize that I'm worthy of more. And going out to the grocery store, even though I money was very, very tight for me back then, and it still is now, but like really tight for me back then, being like, you know what, it's a good investment in my mental health to just spend like that extra dollar and get quality or an extra few dollars and get quality coffee or the extra dollar and get quality bread. Like I'm tired of this. I'm tired of settling for crumbs across the board. So yep, Amethyst says, Dana, me too. I always order one of the cheapest things when I go out to eat. Yep. It's, you know, I think too, as we move forward in getting more into that alignment with ourselves, with our wants, our needs, our feelings, our intuition, all of that, a big part of it, oh man, I tell you, I think it was, Maria, who had said last time, she's like, there's so much grief that tends to come along with this because as you move forward, you have these aha moments, like the simple ones of, oh my God, I've been eating this bread I don't like and this food I don't like, and I've been doing these things. And then there's just the sadness of that makes me so sad that I had been uh, compromising so much of myself all of this time unnecessarily, you know? And realizing that healing it's a process, and that there's going to be a lot of those moments in your healing too where you have those aha moments, and then there's just this grief for oh my goodness, I can't believe I lived this way for 40 years. Like it just there's just a lot of emotions to work through in this, but it's so worth it. And even just a few of these aha moments can just radically change your life and send you on a very different course. YouTube commenter says, making sure you are well fed is something you must do for others and yourself. It is in this way that wages are like $8 to $12 an hour, where one must let down their responsibility to keep their rent paid. And to eat that is so evil. I'm not sure if I fully understand what you're saying, but then let me go back, because obviously this is a very like first world problem, right? To be like, well, like I really want to have nice coffee and nice bread. But I think when money is tight and it is down between paying like rent or groceries, to try to prioritize, to think about, okay, how can I prioritize the money that I do have in certain ways, and like w- you know what just I guess just thinking, I don't know, for me for a long time it was more about like quantity over quality. And um you know it was a bunch of kind of low quality stuff that I really wish I would have spent the same amount of money, but just in a different way. Missouri Cowboy, hello. Says, how do we protect ourselves from unaware codependents when they target us in a group or in a gang? I think it's this the same way in any way. It's this having the boundaries and kind of knowing what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and then to kind of distancing yourself from situations that are not not working for you. Okay, let me scroll down here. YouTube commenter says, I hear what you're saying, but when you give up on things because you can't afford them, it comes down to you not making your own choices, especially in a world of such abundance. Yeah, first world. I think it all boils down to kind of prioritizing the money that you do have in a way that is kind of the healthiest for you. Because I mean, the reality is I am grateful for every, outrageously grateful for every single thing that I have in my life, for hot water, for hot, clean water that comes out of the faucet. I mean, what a gift, I, for the food in my refrigerator, for any money that I do have in my bank account or in my wallet, or the health that I do have. And so please don't get me wrong. Like I am outrageously grateful for everything that I have. But I think it's also important for us to realize, um, to make yourself, it's okay to make yourself a priority, and to prioritize certain things. For years, I didn't make having fun a priority. I didn't make relaxing a priority. I didn't make getting enough sleep a priority. I didn't make like any aspect of my life a priority. And I felt very powerless for a very long time of like, well, I can do all of that at some point down the road when I have enough money, when I have enough time. And um, eh, you know, I think it's important that we start making ourselves a priority now as much as we possibly can, whether it's with time or energy or money or, our mental health or what have you. YouTube commenter says, "Do you ever find that gratitude makes you less combative when it comes to resisting things that you don't want to accept around you? That your mind and focus determines what choices you make?" That's an interesting question. I find that gratitude helps to shift, yes, helps me to shift gears. So if I'm feeling depressed, it's very gratitude is very grounding for me. So if I'm ever feeling depressed, anxious, fearful, upset, um, overwhelmed, to just take a moment and to start listing things that I'm feeling grateful for. It's a really great way to shift gears and to get out of those feelings, because I think trauma in general and stress and life and pain can really make a person feel like their world is very small. And it's very common for people that are overwhelmed and stressed out and what have you to really feel like that they don't have anything to be grateful for, you know? And I catch that within myself. If I'm feeling like I don't have anything to be grateful for, I realize I'm like, well, Dana, then you're not looking very hard, because there's so much out there. Roof over my head, electricity, the internet, a cell phone. There's just so much. And it does help to get me grounded and to get me more centered as well. Oh, hello, Doug. Thank you. Says, have a coffee on me. Thank you for all you do, Dana. The nice live stream donation. Thank you so much, Doug. I appreciate it. Okay, let me scroll up. Okay, let me get back to these notes here. So, okay, so yes, filling in the blanks, interviewing yourself, asking yourself, kind of what is your favorite color? What are your favorite foods? What do you like? What do you dislike? Uh, what are your favorite subjects? What kind of books do you like to read? Really getting curious about who are you? What really juices you? One of the things that I did after my divorce, and it was more so, it was at the tail end of my relationship with Jack. And we had this amazing life. We lived off the grid. We didn't have running water. We didn't have electricity, but I loved it. It was just a very peaceful, beautiful, calm way of life. And I loved it. And, but I was like, I really don't like the city that we live in. And that was at that first kind of moment where I was starting to ask myself, like, could I really see myself here in 10 years? And I started making a list. It's funny how things happen, because of course I didn't know at that time about all of the deceit and all of the chaos and all of everything that was going on with him. But um which of course, if I had known that at the time, it would have been a lot easier to leave. But I started making a list of like, what am I looking for? And I came up with like, I really like being around lakes a lot. Like water just makes my heart come alive. Like I just love it. I love all four seasons. I love the Midwest. I really enjoy farmers markets. I enjoy kind of mom and pop places that are just really unique and not I'm not a big fan of like chain restaurants or chain stores. Like I like the uniqueness of just kind of that independent, kind of artesian type thing. I like places that don't have freeways. Not a big city person, like at all. I like a small-ish town where it's big enough where nobody really knows who you are, but it's small enough that some people do. I like, so I began making a list of like, what do I really like? And then I ended up moving to Michigan. And that's how I ended up moving here, was getting really clear on what do I like? Because at that point in my life, I didn't know. I'd been moving around so much. My ex-husband was military. We'd been moving around so much, and no place really even felt like home anymore. So really having that realization of I love it out here. Like I absolutely, and then I went on a road trip out here through Michigan with my list, and I'm like, I'm going to see if this place exists. And my mom and I went to probably 15 different cities and then got lost and then found where I live now. So, and I love it. No regrets whatsoever. I absolutely love where I live. So it's just, and I didn't have, it's not like I had a ton of money in my account to move out here or um, to be able to comfortably do it. I mean, it was really, really stressful. I had took my tax refund. I had no job. And I was just like, I gotta go for it because I hated where I was living so incredibly much. I'm like, this is so not me. I've got to get out of here. And I don't even care. Like if I have to start donating plasma or like waiting tables or what have you until I can get a job, like that's what I'm going to do because I can't do this anymore. Like I've got to get out of this town. So no regrets. So glad that I just went for it. And yeah, it was tough. It took me a longer than I thought to find the job. And I had credit card debt, and it was just a lot. It was a lot, but I have no regrets. No regrets. It all panned out. So, okay, let's see here. And back to the whole kind of awareness thing is once you start becoming, and I think it is aware, it's easier for people to become aware of their likes and dislikes in things that they're not emotionally invested in. It's a lot easier to start off asking yourself about what colors do you like and your favorite food and what do you like to drink and what is a fun Friday night for you, and what is a fun Sunday morning for you, and those kinds of things. It's a lot easier to get in tune with that kind of stuff than it is to jump right into examining friendships and especially relationships. Like that, it's just, we're so emotionally invested in it that it's really difficult for us to see it clearly. So, ladies laughing at my tea cup. Yes, it's massive. I love it. It's like the size of my head. Paula's making fun of my cup too. Yep. I know. It's like a cup/bowl. I love it. YouTube commenter asks, what are some of your favorite teas? You know what I absolutely love is this yogi tea, and it's Egyptian licorice, which had I seen it just sitting on the shelf, I probably would have never bought it in a million years because I don't like the taste of black licorice at all. But if you've ever gone to an Aveda salon, they have this amazing tea. Like they lose money on me when I go into a Veda. I seriously probably drink like 8 cups of tea when I'm there. And their tea is very expensive. And so I could never bring myself, like, I always kind of justified whenever I'd get my hair cut or whatever there. Cause I'm like, okay, well, I do drink a ton of their tea. So I guess the price kind of evens out. But I was on Amazon the other day and somebody had said, I was looking up a Veda tea and it's expensive. And, um, so I was like, man, I really don't want to spend that much on tea. But somebody had recommended this yogi tea, and they're like, the Egyptian licorice tea tastes exactly like the Aveda tea. And It does. It totally does. So I'm hooked and I just love it. So yogi tea, Egyptian licorice. I can't even describe the taste. It does not taste like an Egyptian or like licorice. So it's it's perfect. It's perfectly sweetened. Like you don't need to add any cream or any honey or any sweetener to it at all. Like it's just delicious, just the way that it is. So if you're up for a good tea, give this one a go. I think you would be very surprised. Yes, Lola says, I love the Egyptian licorice mint tea. I think that might be the same one. I noticed in the cabinet the other day because I bought several boxes of it. Some say Egyptian licorice mint and some say just Egyptian licorice. And I don't like, I've never noticed a difference drinking it. So I don't know. I need to maybe pay more attention. But yes, it's delightful. Let's see. Oh, you're kidding. YouTuber, really? YouTube commenter says, "Yum, I love licorice. I use the anise toothpaste. My favorite teas are from what is it, Rishi? And Republic of Tea has some really good ones. I'll have to check that out. Maybe I would like licorice in tea. I don't know. You know what I think it is? I think it's when I was younger, and this was like 20 years ago. I got really sick off of Jägermeister, which tastes, it has that anise black licorice flavor. But I never even liked black licorice before then. But that really sealed the deal. So I just do not like black licorice ever since then. Okay, so let me scroll down. Let me see where we are with my notes here. Okay, so here's some more questions, some more introspective type questions. Asking yourself, what gives you the most difficulty? What nourishes you the most? What did you do that made yourself the proudest? Who had the most positive influence on you? What excites you the most? What was the biggest risk that you took? And what did you learn from it? And then what do you like most and least about yourself and about your body? And a big part of, learning about yourself, it's learning to listen to your body. Think of a situation and then notice the feelings that surface and if there are any physical sensations that accompany it, such as tension, heaviness, nausea, etc. Something is trying to surface. Try not to analyze things, just let the feelings and images speak to you. I think that is a really big thing too. And so I think for a lot of people, we're so used to not acknowledging certain feelings and just kind of moving forward regardless. But it can be very insightful because everybody processes things differently. So asking yourself, how do I feel if I'm experiencing depression? What are some signs that I can tell when I'm depressed? What are some signs that I can tell when I'm feeling anxious? How do I feel emotionally? And how do I feel physically? So maybe if you're depressed, maybe it's eating more than you normally do, or maybe it's eating less than you normally do, or sleeping too much, or not enough, or not wanting to leave the house, or not wanting to shower, or not wanting to be around other people in general, not returning text messages or phone calls, letting things slide, having maybe not doing dishes, letting um, your house become really messy, just not caring, just feeling numb, kind of a general numbness, feeling like something's off, but maybe not sure why. A lot of people think depression just you feel sad, but it, and it's different for every single person, but a lot of times it's a multitude of other feelings, numbness, overwhelm, just kind of this general, like almost like apathetic kind of feeling where you just don't care, um, disinterest in things, your sleeping is off, your eating is off, those kinds of things. So yeah, getting in tune with how do you feel when you experience different emotions? How do you feel when you feel happy? How do you experience happiness? How do you experience trying to think of some other ones here. Um, how does your body normally process stress? Do you emotionally eat? Do you have back pain? Do you have shoulder pain? Do you find that you're irritable? Do you um, tend to withdraw from society, from other people, or do you tend to reach out and feel the need to talk about your problems like over and over and over again? Um, you know, like I said, everybody processes this stuff differently, so it's really insightful to kind of figure yourself out and be like, yeah, okay, these are some signs that I know now that this is what's going on with me, and so that can be a really great signal to be like, okay, I need to kind of back things up a little bit and maybe double or triple up on my self care right now. And I think that's the thing too is realizing that self care, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. That was another big aha moment for me because before it had definitely always been a luxury. And so like we were talking about earlier with, buying higher quality, if you have the money, buying higher quality certain things that, like for example, coffee is a big thing. I love coffee. I have a cup at least every single day, and I really enjoy a good cup of coffee. And so if that's a priority for you, making maybe spending some more money in that area and buying yourself a good cup of coffee. But even that, like your self-care doesn't need to even cost money. It can just be allowing yourself to sleep in, or allowing yourself to go to bed early, or allowing yourself to get up early and go for watch the sunrise, or to get lost in a really good book that you get from the library, or to color in adult coloring books, or to watch a movie, you know? So I think so oftentimes people think about self-care in terms of spending money on ourselves, but it doesn't even have to be that at all. Calling a good friend, doing these kinds of things. Well, thank you, Clarice, for the live stream donation. I appreciate that. That's a very insightful. Healthy Love says, do you guys see that you eat unhealthy when you are next to a toxic person? I think this is my personal sign that I am around somebody not good for me. Yes. I have found when I am stressed out that I tend to crave high fat, high carb food more so than normal. So that's a big sign for me. If my cravings for food change, uh, that just kind of, or it probably even a bigger sign is if I'm eating a lot of like drive-through food. I don't like drive-through stuff, and if I'm eating like fast food like that, that's a sign that I'm feeling very anxious, and it's oftentimes that feeling of I don't have time. Like I'm late, I'm late, I'm late. I don't have time, and it's a panicked feeling that tends to come out, and then I start finding myself going to the drive-through. It's weird. It's weird, But just learning these things about yourself is huge. Yeah, Trappist says, I know I'm around toxic people if I start drinking and smoking cigarettes again. Yes. And Diana says, yes, definitely high carb for me. Plus, I isolate when I'm overwhelmed. And also, real quick, too, if you guys are just hopping on, my first book, the Start Here book, the ebook version of it is free for today and tomorrow. So if you'd like to go grab a copy on Amazon, please go do so. So you can find it. It's called Start Here. It's by me, Dana Morningstar, and it's on Amazon, and it's free for today and tomorrow. And Doug is taking off. Says, have a wonderful week, all. Goodbye. Have a fantastic week, Doug. We'll see you hopefully next Wednesday. Amethyst says, it's important to not always put yourself last. It showed me how much I felt I had no worth. Yes. Yes, absolutely. And once we start making ourselves a priority, this was something that I really, really, really struggled with because, like I said, I'd been in caregiving professions my whole life, really. I mean, there's been like very, very infrequent times where I would leave and go do something radically different. And then I would like, I don't feel fulfilled and I would get back into caregiving. But um, the, so yeah, making yourself a priority, it felt selfish. And I don't even think I knew how to do that. Like I just really, like hindsight being what is, I think I was so out of tune with things that it really, and I think also it was like I just never had money. So I was like, well, I'm never going to go, like it felt luxurious to go get a massage or to go, um, that for us, especially when I was younger, like that was just, not gonna, that was definitely a big luxury. And that was not something that I made a priority because I couldn't. So, um, but realizing like different, getting clear with yourself, like what are some ways that I can take care of myself and setting those boundaries. One of the examples that she gives that we covered in the first video on this was with the example of there's two different women. We'll say Jane and Jill, I think were the names she used. And Jane, they both had a mother that was dying, and they both wanted to help take care of their dying mother. And so they both were going to quit their jobs. And so Jane was going to do it. I hope I don't have the situations confused, but Jane was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this. And in order for me to be able to take care of my dying mother, I'm going to need to maybe get some extra help around here a few days a week. I'm going to, um, kind of rally the troops. I'm going to see about getting maybe some, meals. I'm either going to prepare as many meals as I possibly can on a Sunday, or I'm going to see if maybe people at church can help us prepare meals. She was reaching out. She was getting resources. She was really making sure she was anticipating as much as she possibly could, so that way she could actually be there for her mother in a sincere and caring way that was doable and sustainable and comfortable for her, versus the other gal who quit her job out of obligation. She didn't want to bother anybody. She didn't want to reach out for any resources. She felt the need to be the only one to take care of her mother. She was there 24 hours on call, just burning herself out. And that I think is so the kind of typical caregiver mentality of like, I'll do it, I'll be fine, I got this handled, kind of fierce independence of, um, I don't want to bother anybody. Like I'll just do this all myself. And then we burn out. And then oftentimes there's a feeling of like resentment and frustration and anger of, well, why isn't anybody helping me? But it's oftentimes because we won't let anybody else help, because we think I'll be fine. I can handle this. I don't want to be a bother. But, we're just out of tune with like our boundaries and our wants and needs with all of this. Okay. Oh, I love that. Healthy Love says, I'm actually teaching my daughter, I'm asking her, will this be good for you? What would be the best for you? I can be there for you, but how can you be there for yourself? Um, yes, that's so good. So much of this is like modeling, role modeling that behavior, and then explaining why we're doing what we're doing. And then I love that. And then encouraging your child to do the same. Thinking about, okay, what would be the nicest thing that you could do for yourself right now? Or what do you think your future self would thank you for? Or what would your future self want you to do? Or, getting clear, how do you relax? And talking about how do you experience stress? And, I think too, so oftentimes we can be so like unintentionally dismissive of children when they are experiencing like stress about a test or a breakup or a friendship that goes sour. And we can be so, it's so easy for us to forget that they don't really have this whole wealth of experience that we do. And so having a really stressful test or a friend that kind of does them wrong or what have you is such a huge thing because it might be like the first time that happened to them. And so having these conversations as early on as possible about kind of helping them develop resiliency and understanding themselves um, and just validating like okay and in helping them to learn to anticipate okay if you're going to have a stressful exam yeah boy those end of the year exams those really can be stressful and so what are some things that we can do ahead of time and then maybe after the exam so maybe ahead of time like you can make sure that you can wake up early enough that you can have a good breakfast and that you get to bed at a decent time the night before and that maybe you listen to some of your favorite music on the way to school and then afterwards let's we can unwind by watching maybe one of our favorite shows or watching one of your favorite shows or playing a board game or going for a walk or and yeah just really role modeling that is huge. Yes, I love it. Healthy Love says, yes, my daughter now has more access to that education and she gets, um, and she's more able to protect herself. Yes. Yeah. And, as far as stress goes too, like one of the big aha moments that I had when I was going through everything the second time around with all of this, I was just so beside myself with, I mean, I was so stressed out. I just was so incredibly stressed out. And I just remember very clearly thinking, you know, I am sure that there will never be a point that I will look back on this period in my life and think to myself, well, boy, I really wish I would have worried about that more. Like, that's the only thing that I knew for certain. Everything else around me was falling apart and caving in. But that was the one thing I knew for certain is that I will never wish that I worried about this more. Like, I can either do something about it, or if I can't, then I just need to let it go. You know, I can only do what I can do. Okay, so let me scroll down, see what else is. Oh, there's just so much in this book. Um, yes, okay. So one of the things she was talking about was getting in tune with how you feel about things. And she said to stand up with your eyes closed and ask yourself a question. Imagine that leaning forward means yes and leaning backwards means no. Ask yourself a yes or no question. Close your eyes and see which way you sway. This is actually, that might sound very strange, but it's kind of a bypassing the logic and rational mind and using more of the subconscious. So when people, if you've ever seen, and this might sound kind of like a woo-woo thing, but some people will use like a weighted pendulum and they'll hold it and it'll start spinning in a certain way. And a certain way means yes, another certain way means no. And it's that exact same concept. And what it is it's not coming, it's coming from like your subconscious mind is actually moving the pendulum and it's moving your body one way or the other. So oftentimes when a person says that they don't know, if we ask ourselves, what do you need right now? And we say, you know what, I don't know. The odds are we do know, but we're just not comfortable with the answer. So I don't know tends to be one of those like barricades that our brain throws up when it's uncomfortable with the answer. So I really like that idea of like swaying back and forth and yet forward means yes, backwards means no. It's interesting that the information that your body and your brain is trying to tell you that your conscious mind is not allowing to surface. And then, okay, so another example she gives is building your emotional vocabulary. Most feelings are variations or combinations of the following four basic emotions: sadness, sad, glad, mad, and fear. There are over 200 emotions. Bliss, calm, contentment, elation are all under the category of glad. Angst, anxiety, desperation, indecision, insecurity, and jealousy are all under fear. And let's see, she says, feelings may not seem logical, but they do have a logic and intelligence of their own. Try to feel the feeling under the surface. Feelings are not a sign of weakness. And then I kind of added, if anything, not wanting to acknowledge feelings is a sign of weakness. The danger lies in ignoring feelings, which can lead to poor decisions and health problems. Many people think that feeling their feelings won't change anything, but this is not true. So they might say, well, why? What's the point? Why should I feel angry or hurt? And it's not going to change what happened. But honoring and allowing your feelings does change you. The feeling passes through, and resisting those feelings makes them persist. When we repress feelings, they can come out sideways and explode and sabotage you. That is so, so, so true. And expanding that emotional vocabulary is so powerful, because if we're only using a certain number of words to describe how we feel, then we can become very confused. So some of the ways that jump to mind are when people describe love. This is a societal thing that just like sends me into orbit, but it's very common when it comes to abuse, where they're like, I love this person. Oh, I can't stop thinking about him, and they lied and cheated and stole from me and treated me like garbage and called me names, but I love them. And it irks me because, and especially in the English language, there is no, we're using that word love incorrectly, because it's a lot of those intense feelings, like that craving of that other person, that like obsessive um, desire, addictive feeling that we might have towards that other person, but that's not love. Love is based on appreciation and um, caring and compassion, and that sense of mutuality, of trust and honesty and support. And um, love doesn't hurt, and love doesn't abuse, and it doesn't cheat and lie and steal and deceive and manipulate and do all those things. That's not love. That's the opposite of love. And so getting clear on when we're feeling these different feelings, like what exactly are we feeling? Because if we mislabel feelings, if we're calling abuse love, then it can cause a lot of that cognitive dissonance. And then we're very confused, because we're like, but I love him, or her, right? I love this person. I love them. And it's like, well, actually, do you, or do you just have a lot of these really intense feelings towards this person? Because there's a big difference. And another ways that I've been trying to kind of better understand my feelings is I've been saying I have all this anxiety before I start doing these live streams. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the gal had said she experiences the exact same thing. And she had said that she started changing the way that she described her feelings to herself. Because before she was like, it's stage fright, it's anxiety, it's all of these things. And now she's like, you know what? These feelings, it's when I feel brave, when I'm courageous, when I'm stepping out of my comfort zone, I also feel these types of feelings. And so it's okay. These are the feelings of me being brave. And I really liked that, because I think we all tend to have kind of this limited emotional vocabulary. So expanding how we understand our emotions is huge. Okay. Let's see here. Talking about the importance of identifying our needs and our wants. We all have needs, and it's important that we can learn to meet them. And if we don't meet them, then, or if they're not being met, then we oftentimes start feeling resentful and angry. Identifying your wants. Your wants are expressions of your uniqueness. If they weren't mirrored in your childhood, then you may have stopped wanting. Some parents give their children stuff, but don't give them what they emotionally want. Some shame their children for wanting something they can't afford or when they don't want to fulfill their child's emotional or physical wants. There are parents who give their children what they think they should have instead of what their children want. Sometimes it's appropriate to deny a child what they want, but it's important to comfort a child's disappointment. Painful experiences with wanting can make a child feel that they shouldn't want, and so they shut down their desires. As adults, they might not buy themselves what they want, or others indulge themselves indiscriminately when they can't afford it in an attempt to fill an insatiable hunger for the love they've missed. And then she gives another example here. Complete this sentence. I really want to blank. Assume that time and money is no object. Then make a list of the things that you want, such as things that, wait, make a list of things that you Make a want list of things you can go do or get, such as a haircut, go dancing, plant strawberries, learn Spanish, join a group, etc. Start with the easiest and make a goal to do each thing on your list. Listen to your internal messages that dissuade you from doing what you want. Write them down and see if they remind you of your parental messages. Then write arguments supporting your wants. List the things that you have to do and then mark whether or not you want to do them. Sometimes a have is also a want, but can you change a have into a want? That's a big thing too. So getting in tune with, and this was a question, I used to read a ton of books about trying to kind of figure out like, what did I want to be? What do I want to be when I grow up? Because again, I was so out of tune. I'm like, I don't really know. I was all over the place. I was like a teacher, and then I was an advocate for a while, and then I was a nurse for a while. And I'm like, I'm feeling unfulfilled. This isn't for me, but I don't know what I'm doing. And I want to get back into advocacy, but how do I do that? And so I was going, there was this phase for like 10 years. There was this long phase in my life where I kept reading all these books, like What Color is Your Parachute? And all of these books to help try to gain insight because I couldn't figure out what I wanted. But I think what it really was I was so out of tune with wanting in general. That's why I was just spinning in circles. So, and that's a really great question to ask yourself. Okay, if time and money were no object, like what do you want? What would you really want and why? And I will tell you that that might seem like a very superficial question or an easy to answer question, but it's really not. And there's so many layers to that because people will oftentimes spout off, oh, I want $1 million. I want a big fancy car, a big fancy house. And the more they get clarity towards the why, like why why would you want $1 million? What would you do with it? Or if you had a big fancy house, why? Or the same thing with the car. And not saying that there's anything wrong or bad with wanting those things, but getting really clear, is that what you really want? Or is it the things that you think that money could buy you? Would it be travel? Would it be freedom? Would it be the ability to quit your job? Would having a big house, just getting clear on why you're wanting what you're wanting. It's just pulling a string on a sweater is just full of insight when you start kind of getting into that. Because here's the thing too with wants is it's very rarely about the stuff. It's more so about the emotions that we think the stuff is going to bring. So like I was saying with the money, people are like, I want $1 million. Well, okay, but why? Oh, so I can maybe go start an animal rescue, and so I can um, travel, and so I can quit my job. Okay, well, what emotions do you think that would bring you? Oh, starting an animal rescue would just make my heart sing. I would just love to be able to help animals. Okay. And quitting my job would give me that sense of freedom. I would be able to maybe take more time to be creative and just kind of own my life and be able to do what I want to do. And then you realize, okay, these are the emotional parts of me that are crying out, and that I can start meeting those needs today without having $1 million or starting an animal rescue, like, or quitting my job. Like I can start meeting those needs. And that's I think the benefit of that is then we're not waiting for these big events to happen. We're meeting those needs in smaller ways on a more regular basis. So, and then she talks about changing a have to into a want to. So, for example, if we have to go work out, but changing that and being like, you know what, if you hate the gym, then don't go to the gym. Maybe you can go to a yoga class, maybe you can go to a kickboxing class, maybe you can take up running, maybe you can practice martial arts, maybe you can, go roller skating. Like there any number of things to get activity in your life. Like what would you like to go do? What would you want to go do? If you have to study for an exam, maybe to make that more enjoyable, you could actually go study with friends. If you have to go buy a gift for a friend's birthday, um, could you make that into that you really want to buy a gift for a friend's birthday? So, like the example I gave earlier about my one friend who was such an amazing gift giver. And I used to really dread holidays and birthdays for myself and for other people. And then now it's sort of like I trying to shift that into something that's like, you know what, this is not doesn't have to be this painful experience. This can be me really showing them just how much they mean to me. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be any of that. It's just those little things of like, hey man, I know you. I really like I want to just acknowledge you and appreciate you. And here's something that made me think of you, And so then it makes buying a gift enjoyable. Feeling like you have to call your mother often, but deciding, you know what, I really want to just call my mom once a week. And so shifting, figuring out what's working for you. Where is that line there? Um, and let's see. Trusting yourself. This is a big one. If you grew up in a family where your feelings and perceptions were denied, you learned that you couldn't trust your internal cues, your observations, feelings, and impressions. As a result, your ability to make solid decisions became impaired. By looking towards others for answers, you give up living your own life. Additionally, if you're unable to discern situations and people that are dangerous or not good for you, you end up trusting untrustworthy people and relationships that damage you again and again, creating more distrust. Listening to yourself and honoring your feelings are the beginning of trusting, loving, and protecting yourself. Absolutely. So then she says, okay, ask yourself, what would be the most loving thing that I could do for myself in this situation? Ask yourself, and how do I feel about it? Instead of trying to think about what to do or what you think about, spend time with yourself deciding before you ask others. This is a big thing, and I'll touch on this here in a second. If you ask for advice, make sure it lines up with your inner voice before you act. The more you do this, the more you are able to trust yourself and the more your life becomes your own. I love that so incredibly much. And it's so common for people to get out of a narcissistic relationship and or just struggle with indecision, with not knowing, with needing that constant validation, being confused, but especially if they've been tangled up with an emotional manipulator, that level of manipulation is really confusing. And so they're like, I don't trust myself. I don't trust them. I don't know which end is up. I don't know how to move forward. And so there's a lot of confusion that's present at the end of these relationships. And um, it's so important, and it does take time to learn to trust yourself. And I always encourage people to that you do know, like you really do know what's right for you deep down inside. You really do. It's just going to be learning to trust yourself and to get in tune with how your feelings and your intuition, and realizing that you can walk away from a situation. Like you don't have to wait until it gets really bad in order to leave, and figuring out, okay, what do I need to do in order to keep myself safe? Um, how does a safe person feel? How do I feel around the right type of situation for me? Not even a safe person. Like that's a good start. How do dangerous people how do I feel around dangerous people? Um, how do I feel around unsafe people? And then how do you feel around people that are just maybe nice people, but are simply not your people? That's a big one. Like, it's kind of like next level stuff. And then paying attention to how do you feel when you are around your kind of people? Odds are you feel heard, you feel validated, you feel a sense of fun. Conversation tends to be pretty easy. You have a lot of the same likes and dislikes, and you just really click. Like, it's just that feeling of, yeah, this feels good. You know. Uh, so learning to tune into your inner wisdom, and one of the questions that I like to ask people when they say, because again, people will say, well, I don't know. I don't know. This is a good question to ask yourself is, if you did know, what would you say? Or if you did know, what would you guess? It's amazing. It's how our brain will just put up that as a defense. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And to take away that stress and kind of tiptoe around that part of our brain and just say, well, you know what? Okay, but if you did know, what would you say? And it's just amazing the answers that tend to come out. Because it really is. It's so important that you guys realize that you do have the ability to discern people and situations, and that you can trust yourself. And learning to trust yourself, it really does happen in little situations every single day, where you're like, and it comes from reflection too. And this still happens where I'm like, you know what, man, I knew better. I knew something was off and I went forward with it anyhow. Or, I just had that funny feeling and now I'm kind of kicking myself. But to show yourself compassion as you're getting more in tune with this kind of stuff. So, and identifying your values is a big thing. You give your time and attention to things that value most. Integrity means integration of your values, beliefs, and behaviors, that you walk your talk. So I like that a lot. Getting really clear on like, what do you value? And so she gives some examples of questions to ask yourself. What makes you angry about things in the world? Which organizations or charities do you or would you support? What mentors or public figures do you respect or admire, and why? Which religious beliefs do you agree with or disagree with, and why? What are your political views and why? And then what book or movie genres do you most enjoy and why? It's all just a big part of getting to know yourself. And as you, like I said, as you move forward, you're going to start having these aha moments in different areas. So exploring as many facets of your life as possible and really examining each piece. And you've heard me talk about this before, but I often say, a relationship with a narcissist, it's like a bomb going off in your life. And you're a person oftentimes is left in this rubble with all of this mess, physical, emotional, financial mess to clean up. And it can be so incredibly overwhelming. But the beauty in that level of destruction is that you are at almost, it's in many ways, it's almost just like this sacred space that is, it's a very kind of rare window of opportunity that you now get to start choosing, consciously choosing every single piece of your life that you're going to rebuild with. And even though it's overwhelming, it's in many ways, it can be such an opportunity. And the person that you can rebuild yourself into, the life that you can rebuild at that next phase can be even better than before, because now you're consciously examining things and you're getting in tune with your wants and your needs and your thoughts and your feelings and your boundaries and your standards and your intuition and just all of it. So that's what I got from this book. Like I said, there's just so much in here. And, um, yes, Missouri Cowboy says, I am so thankful that I can now question everything. And yes, that is such a big part of all of this, is questioning everything. that that's okay and that it's healthy to just question everything, you know? So that's what I got for you guys. The book that we are reading, and so just as a recap, that this book is Codependency for Dummies by Darlene Lancer. And again, if you're interested in an Audible book, you can go to audibletrial.com/thrive after abuse and get a free Audible book. I think if you sign up for a subscription with Audible. So, and then the book for February is Who's Pulling Your Strings by Harriet Bracker and Kate Reading. So I'll be putting links down below in this video after it goes on YouTube and, you know, does all that stuff. So you guys, thank you so, so much for joining me tonight. I hope that helps. And oh, real quick, Amethyst, I like that. Amethyst says, Dana, this affirmation is the only one that I can say with confidence and actually believe it. I trust myself. Is that a good affirmation? That is a great affirmation. And what a wonderful, powerful place to start with affirmations. I love it. Yeah, you can. You can trust yourself. And with a lot of these affirmations, I do find it really helpful to start kind of tapping in, tuning in to the things that you do believe. So maybe if you also believe, you know what, um, I've been through stuff before, I can get through what I'm going through now. I am a kind, compassionate person. I believe that I matter. I am a good friend. I am a good person. I trust myself. I can do this. I will keep moving forward one step at a time. There is so much right with me. Um, so kind of thinking, building up steam with thinking about, okay, what else do you believe? Because odds are you probably do believe quite a few other things. You might just not have ever really been in a place to actually think about all that. But there's a lot that's positive and right about you and that you're capable of. You're strong, you've been through the abuse, you'll get through the recovery. Yeah. So you guys take care so much. And I'll see you next Wednesday at the live stream and then the book club, which is the last Thursday of every month. So we'll see you later. Take care. As always, lots of love to you. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and I will talk to you soon. Have a good night.